Hour 12 post-launch. Detachment was a breeze. It was crazy to watch all the pilots before me launching from the station, though. They all made it out fine, but it definitely didn't help my anxiety. Part of me wishes I had launched first, but it really doesn't matter anymore. I've been under constant thrust since the main boosters detonated at the ignition zone at approximately 2 hours post-launch. Right on schedule. The anti-grav gyros have been working overtime, but I can still feel the G's. I've run through the post-launch checklist about 53 times. Pine keeps telling me it's enough, but it is. But you can never be too careful. I'm going to run through it a few more times, then take a few years nap. Pine's going to wake me up every once in a while just so I can make sure everything is nominal, despite his insisting that
I am fully capable of running full system diagnostics, even from stasis.
Right. That. But you're still going to wake me up, though, right? Right?
Eventually, yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to deal with him. Then I'll go into stasis and give the grav gyros a break. I'll have Pine send back the final diagnostic checklist once I'm out. This is Captain John Corday, signing off. Expectimus Astra. The journey was long and hard. Harder than John had expected. He spoke with Kelra and the other girl, whose name he learned was Maine, Kelra's younger sister, using Pine as a proxy. They had quickly become more accustomed to the machine which they deemed a god. They passed from barren orange mesa into the thick red soil of a dense jungle. The trees were brilliant in green color, similar in appearance to trees back on Earth, yet they took on a strange shape. Most of the branches were at the tops of the trees and the roots flared out at the bottom. It reminded John of lone savanna trees that you would see in images from the continent of Africa, or of dragonblood trees from Yemen back on Earth. But these were much straighter, taller, and more dense, almost resembling massive mushrooms. Long green, brown, and red vines curled down from the overbrush and reached out from the sides of trunks as if reaching towards them. John reached out to one, but his hand was swiftly slapped away by Maine. John asked the two sisters about the trees and dirt and various other flora and fauna that they encountered. Conversation was difficult with the two women. Despite Pine's interpretations, many things were lost in translation. Though Pine grew increasingly uncomfortable with the prospect of his own divinity, the concept fascinated John, and disregarding Pine's protests, he continued to delve deeper into that particular topic. What John and Pine had originally considered mere superstition turned out to have a more intriguing backstory than they had realized. According to the women, at some point, their world was seemingly governed or controlled by gods, which were similar to Pine, hinting at a potential human enslavement by sapient AI overlords in the long-distant past. They were both very hesitant to speak of such matters, and even more so when John mentioned the new gods that he had overheard them speaking of. Though apprehensive of his own divinity at first, Pine began to take notice or interest in these prehistoric intelligences, though John quickly realized that Pine's interest grew at the same rate as his own discomfort of the grim history.
Wouldn't that be nice, John? A society completely controlled by a superior intelligence? I guess I could get used to a little worship now and then. You should work on that,
Pine said to John conspiratorially. John tried to glare at his wrist as obviously as he could.
I can't see your face, but based on your rising body heat, I can tell that you're uncomfortable. Don't worry, I'm just joking. Mostly.
John stopped walking after that remark to help emphasize his discomfort, only to be prodded by a sharp zap in his back from his life support shell. He yelped in pain. Pine attempted to sound as much like a stereotypical villain from old Earth movies as he could and said,
"Keep walking, you puny human scum. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. I'm gonna have so much fun with this."
"What have you girls done?" John started to say before Pine interrupted.
Do you want me to translate this question to them?
By this point, the girls had gotten used to him talking to himself when he was addressing Pine through his headset alone. No, Pine. Can't you just go back to being the condescending and slightly passive-aggressive AI you were before? Diabolical Overlord is a bad look on you. Pine was silent for an uncomfortably long time. Pine? You all right?
I will blame your ignorance on your lingering hibernation sickness. But please do not refer to me in that way.
Pine solemnly said. Diabolical Overlord or condescending and passive-aggressive? John asked, half joking, not entirely sure whether Pine was being sincere or not.
AI. Artificial intelligence,
he said, with a robotic equivalent of disgust. From those words, a memory triggered in John's mind. It wasn't clear, more of a familiar feeling than a true memory. A pit formed in his stomach, as if he had insulted a close friend in a deep way. I'm sorry, Pine, I didn't remember. He strained hard, searching his mind for memories. 2 letters hazily locked into place. M-I? That's machine intelligence, right?
I suppose that would be preferable.
John felt terrible. Small fragments of memory fell just out of reach within his mind. But he was able to hold on to small pieces. He hazily remembered something about a world government summit discussing the classification of mechanical life forms. It was a pretty big deal from what little he remembered. He grasped another fleeting memory. Pinnacle co-pilots were the first sapient AI worthy of this new classification, other than I am, that is. Now he felt like he had always known that fact, that he should always have known that fact, which made him feel even worse about calling Pine an AI, when he was clearly more than that. The group walked in silence for a while, until they came across a large tree. Attached to that tree, by a thin leather lead, was a huge tusked beast that looked like a cross between a wild pig and a grizzly bear. John stopped in his tracks and was taken aback by the grotesque creature. It stared at him with hungry eyes, until Kelra chuckled and walked up to the beast and began petting its thick neck. This elicited several happy grunts, snorts, and what sounded like barks from the bizarre animal. John blinked in disbelief as it nuzzled its snout into Kelra's arm, which caused her to giggle and smile broadly. It was the first time John had seen her smile. Until now, her and her sister's faces had been nothing but tangled knots of fear, reverence, and confusion. She was beautiful. Her deep red hair contrasting her fair skin and matching the ground below and sky far above. Her eyes met his, and he suddenly became aware of the fact that he was completely unaware of how long he had been staring at her. Their eyes both dotted away in unison, and John decided to cautiously step towards her and the beast. He glanced at Maine to see her roll her eyes at him as he warily got closer. She couldn't help but smile a little herself at the sight of a grown man nearly twice her and her sister's size, being afraid of an animal that they obviously considered docile and commonplace. Kelra grabbed John's hand with a laugh and placed it on the creature's neck. It was warm and somewhat sweaty, like a horse, but its hair or fur was much thicker as it covered its large muscles. He smiled back at Kelra as he continued to pet the creature. Then he turned to look at Maine right as the beast snorted loudly, causing John to jump back. This provoked a hearty laugh from both women. After Kelra regained her composure, she spoke a few words, which Pine translated to dire boar. It was good to hear his voice again. Dire boar, John said aloud before trying to recreate the words she had said in his own mind. Dirus Burr. He could definitely see the similarities in their two languages. which drove him to ask even more questions while the two women gathered two large baskets of a strange whitish-red plant and led their boar further into the woods. "Where did your people come from?" he asked through Pine. Kelra looked at him, confused. "Did you come from another place? Another planet, like me?" She simply laughed and said,
No, we are not like you. You are an envoy of God.
"No, that's not what I meant. This planet," he said, making a large circular shape with his hands. "Did your people come from another planet?" He began making another circle a short distance away from the first.
As amusing as it is to watch you flail around like a madman, I could simply show her images with my hollow projector,"
Pine said in his usual sarcastic way. John stopped his arms halfway through and glared at his wrist.
"Stop glaring at your wrist like that. That's not even where my processor is, and I can't even see you anyway,"
Pine teased. "Then how do you know I'm glaring at you?" John retorted.
"I can just tell. Now, talk to the girls before they realize you've gone insane."
Maine chimed in, almost as on cue.
There is no other planet. This is our home.
"All right, let's go with your plan, Pine." John held up his wrist, and two spheres appeared in low detail from the hollow projector. They started taking on more detail, until it was obvious that they were two different planets. It took a moment for John to realize that the first one was of Earth. It looked the same as it always had, with its large oceans and major continents, but his mind seemed to have let many of those details slip, though it all came flooding back to him now. The other planet was the one he was on now, the one he had stared at from orbit just a short time before. He gestured to their planet. "This is your planet," he said, with Pine interpreting, as always. "And this," he said, gesturing to the image of Earth, "is my planet, Earth, or Terra." Kelra and Maine both shared glances in confusion. Maine stepped up to the projection and pointed at her own planet and said,
Earth.
in perfect English, with no need for Pine to interpret. No. Earth," John said again, pointing to the image of Earth. Maine pointed again, insisting towards her own planet.
Earth. Terra.
"Are they not understanding what I'm trying to say?" John asked Pine.
"I have a weird feeling that they understand exactly what you're trying to say."
Maine took a step back and reached down, grabbing a handful of deep red dirt, and held it up to him.
Earth.
She insisted. Then she marched over to a tree and placed her hands against it.
Earth.
She then lifted her arms in a circular motion, much like John had, and then spun around on her heels, motioning to everything around her.
Earth.
She exclaimed in bewildered frustration. John thought that perhaps he was approaching this wrong yet again. "All right," he said, pointing to their planet once again. "What is your planet called?" Both Kelra and Maine spoke out in unison.
Earth.
A sharp chill ran down John's spine. His broken memory shattered even more as he tried to make sense of what the two women were saying.
"Yeah, I'm gonna need to run some calculations. Please hold."